Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Act on Mental Health. I'm Sean Hardy, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in Indiana. And in my spare time, I'm also a guide to help people through the complex world of acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT, as well as the underlying science behind it, relational frame theory, or RFT. Now, today's video is a bit of a special. As we're getting into the holidays, I thought I would make a wish list for recommended books on ACT and RFT. So I have 15 books that I think that will really help you. And the way that I've broken these down is into 3 categories. So if you're a graduate student, a working professional, or for self-therapy. And so grab a cozy spot, maybe a blanket, your favorite drink, mine's coffee, and join me as we talk about recommended books for your Christmas wish list. Now let's start with graduate students. Now I know if you're in graduate school, you probably got a lot of reading already, but if you're like me, you don't mind it. You like to read, and you're probably going outside of the curriculum to look for what you're going to be using as therapeutic modality. Now for me, I stumbled across ACT and I just fell in love with it. I love the ideas, how it's based on science, and just how it works with helping people to change and heal. Now, these books are in the order that I'd recommend reading them to familiarize yourself with ACT and learn RFT. The first book I'd recommend is called ACT Made Simple by Russ. Now, he writes a user-friendly guide to kind of demystify ACT for learners. And so it's an easy-to-approach book and offers a step-by-step guidance on how these processes work so that you can grab a hold of them in a non-threatening way. And so it's a great book to go through and just kind of make these complex ideas accessible. This book is an excellent starting point for those that are in the early stages of mastering ACT. And I assume if you found out about it, it's probably a snippet in your graduate materials. And so this book will be, I think, a great resource for you. The second book that I recommend for graduate students is Acceptance and Commitment Therapy for Dummies. Now, this is written by 2 guys that I'm unfamiliar with. I haven't read another book from them, but they do a really good job of breaking down the 6 core processes, as well as they have a chapter on relational frame theory that I use for 2 of my videos on RFT Explained. And so they offer some practical tools in there, some exercises, as well as they make it engaging. So you can read from page 1 all the way through, or just pick up in a chapter that you want to learn more about ACT on. The next book is Learning ACT by Jason Luoma, Stephen Hayes, and Robyn D. Walser. Now, these are some of the writers that you'll come across with. They have a lot of resources out there, a lot of books they've written, a lot of papers they've written. But I think that this one, above all the others, is where you can really dig in and get to more of the advanced learnings of ACT. This was one that in my graduate program they had for one of the classes, I want to say on clinical assessment. And they had some really good stuff in there. And then they allowed us to do role play and practice this with other students. The fourth book I'd recommend for graduate students is called Mastering the Clinical Conversation. Now, this is authored by Jennifer Villatte. Now, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right, but it's a really excellent book and something I recommend if you want to take what your understanding of ACT to the next level to how it might apply to clinical or counseling practice. Now, in graduate school, a lot of what you're doing is you're learning theories, you're kind of familiarizing yourself with the landscape of counseling and psychotherapy. And so a lot of your knowledge is kind of a little bit of everything, like a jack of all trades kind of thing. This one will really help you to enhance your skill and knowledge of the ACT modality. And so they really do a good job of breaking down how relational frame theory plays in and what's taking place when you're talking with another client and you're addressing some of their mental health symptoms. The fifth book I'd recommend for graduate students is called Learning RFT, and this is written by Nicholas Ternecki. Now, this is one I'm actually rereading. I read it a couple of years ago, and I'm reading it again because it really is that good. When I went through it, I think I had so many aha moments that I'd have to stop reading the book and just think about what I was reading. And it kind of challenged my ideas about language, my ideas about thoughts and how that's verbal behavior. And so it ties in a lot of behavioral principles, behavioral psychology, and how that led into RFT. And so it takes a while to get into the RFT portion, but it's one that I think does a great job from building from 0 all the way up. And I think if you're excited about ACT, you're excited about learning RFT, then this would be the next one I would say to get into. And I think it will have a transformational effect on you like it did with me, because Czernicki has written a couple books, and every one of his is just so good. Now, the next set of books that I'm recommending are for those that are in the professional field. So if you're a counselor, psychologist, or a clinician, maybe you're a social worker, you work with people in the helping field, these books are going to be really good for you if you're learning ACT while you're also working. Now, a lot of companies, they have continuing education programs, and so you're probably getting training or you're getting a lot of extra support. But I find doing my own reading really helps me to stay sharp and to continue to work on the craft of helping people. So these would be really good next reads for you. The first book that I recommend here is called The ABCs of Human Behavior. Now, this is written by Nicholas Czernicki that I mentioned earlier, as well as Jonas Romero. Now, this book is excellent. I've read it 3 times, and each time I pick up new concepts that I missed before. Now, it seems simple, like the ABCs, but what he's talking about throughout the book is antecedents of behavior, and then the consequences or the contingencies. Now, if you're new to behavioral psychology, you may not have heard those terms before, but for those that are behavioral analysis or work with people and you have to use those terms, you're going to really know this material already. But what I like about it is not only explaining those terms, but he also kind of shows you how it's used in a functional analysis, like in session, and how you can break down the behavior in a way that you can use it for treatment plans and maybe help develop goals. So there's a lot of things here that kind of help you to understand the function of behavior and in the context that it's in. And I think it'll give you some creative ideas on how to use it for conditions that you often see. And so I really like it. I mean, I keep going back to it when I forget things. And so definitely want to start with that one. Now, the second one that I recommend for professionals is one that I've seen recommended on a lot of the support groups that I've seen on Facebook, as well as the contextual behavioral science community. And it's called The Heart of ACT. And this is written by Robyn D. Walser. Now, the person who writes this is somebody who's written another book. I mean, you're welcome to read it, but it's called ACT for PTSD. And she just, really specializes in that, working with veterans, and kind of brings that perspective into her other writings. What I like about The Heart of ACT is it really captures why we're doing what we're doing, and why ACT is so different than other modalities. And so it helps you to kind of, not to use the term fall in love, because I don't really see it's a love relationship with ACT, but I think what it does is it connects you with how meaningful that ACT can be for yourself as a therapist, as well as those that you serve, and how to do ACT in a consistent and have fidelity with it. So definitely want to recommend The Heart of ACT. The third book that I recommend for professionals is called The Big Book of ACT Metaphors. Now, this is written by a couple authors. They're basically like a collection of metaphors that are commonly used in ACT. ACT is not a protocol that has step 1 to step 10. It's something that you can kind of fit for clients. And that's what I like about it. So you may be talking about the core process of acceptance, and you may use like a metaphor like the tug of war metaphor, because that really helps clients kind of understand how they need to drop the rope. But maybe for some clients that metaphor may not work for them, or maybe they just never played tug of war, so they don't understand that concept. And so I think it's good to have a resource like this to be able to look at. They have dozens of metaphors for each of these processes and the scripts that go with them. So it's a resource to put in your toolkit if you don't have it already, and something that'll hopefully give you some ideas on what you can use in your practice. Now, the fourth book that I'd recommend for professionals it's not ACT specific. It's written by Dan Siegel, which, if you don't know him, he comes at things from a neuroscience point of view. And I find his work really, really helpful in understanding mindfulness, being present moment awareness, those kind of things. He's got a method called Mindsight, which that's an excellent book as well. Mindsight that helps people to anchor and use kind of the mindfulness wheel, I think is what he calls it. Anyways, The Mindful Therapist, I think, is a great book for professionals because it helps you to put into practice what you're teaching. It helps you to be more authentic and genuine with what you're suggesting, because it's not just like, yeah, mindfulness could work for you, but it's something that you've seen it work for yourself. And it also kind of goes through like transference that happens where a client may remind you of maybe your dad, or maybe what conflict was like in your home. You kind of get wrapped into that, and it can help you actually have some skills to be able to, in session, to be able to anchor yourself and to stay present for your client and to help you through, those things that kind of sweep you away. And so although it's not ACT specific, I find his work really, really fits with what we're trying to do in ACT. All right, now the fifth one that I want to recommend is called A Contextual Behavioral Guide to the Self. Now this book it totally blew me away when I read it. I was not expecting it to have the impact that it had on me as a professional and as a person. But reading it, it really helps you understand those three selves that is talked about. Where you have self as context, or self as perspective. You have self as process, and then self as content. But the way that it does it, I think it just jumps off the page. The ideas are really good, but I think the way that it impacted me as I was reading, and it was something that I think changed the way that I interact with myself and interact with thoughts as well as relationships. And so it's one of those books, though, that I wouldn't recommend you just jump into that if you don't know much about ACT. I think you would have to have a pretty good comfortability with it to get the most out of something like this. And you may have an experience where you're getting into that, and you're like, it gets so complex that you almost don't want to read it because it just makes your mind hurt. But with this one, I just thought what they were talking about just resonated so much with me. And I've read this one twice, and both times it was right when I needed to go through it. So definitely want to recommend this for professionals, those that have a good comfortability with ACT. All right, in this section, I wanted to give some books for those that are trying to do therapy on their own, maybe as a supplemental to counseling they're already receiving, or they're trying to develop coping skills and work on their own mental health, trying to address maybe some symptoms that they're experiencing. So I thought I'd do a section of books for those that are in that category. Now, the first one that I would recommend is the first book that I read on ACT, and it's actually a workbook by Stephen Hayes, the founder of ACT, and it's called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life. I love the title, and the book doesn't disappoint. They also have a teen version if you have a teen in your life that would maybe like a workbook like this. But what I like about it is it leads you through kind of a step-by-step sequence of understanding ACT from the ground up. And what it does is it gives you all sorts of guides and exercises, as well as writing out your experiences. And I'll tell you, when I went through that, I was writing things down, and I had a PDF of it, and I was writing on my tablet, and it's kind of reviewing some of my experiences. And having no experience with acceptance and commitment therapy, I was just in graduate school reading through this, and it was so powerful for me going through some of these exercises for the first time. And some of the guides that they had, like I remember the leaves on the stream, and I did that in, I think, my first video. But I remember going through that and just having a surreal kind of transcendental experience of watching my thoughts going down the stream and disappearing, and almost being like upset by the experience, because I was so unfamiliar with mindfulness. And so going through a book like that for me was probably the best thing that I could have done to understand ACT. And so if you're in that situation where you really don't know much about it, but you are interested, start out with a workbook and actually put that practice or put it to practice. Now, the second one I'd recommend for those that are doing self-therapy is called Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. Now, this is a book. I don't think it's a workbook, but it's a book that you can read. But what I like about it is it has an accompanying resource, an online course that you can do at Russ Harris's website. I believe it's called thehappinesstrap.com. I could be wrong on that. But he has a course, and I don't know if it's free or costs money. I think it's free, if I remember right. But this is one that's probably the most common as a supplemental resource for ACT therapists. And so you probably may have been, this book may have already been recommended to you, but if you haven't read it, I think for Americans, this book it just pops that myth of happiness, what we're all chasing. And it gives you kind of a real talk about suffering and your approach to life. If your approach to life is to limit suffering or to have no suffering and to choose happiness, it just limits and constrains your life so much. So that's the idea behind Happiness Trap. And definitely a book, I'd say, read that as a way to kind of rock your world a little bit on really what life is about. The third book I'd recommend for those doing self-therapy is called the Little Act Workbook. And as the name suggests, it's little, very simple and straightforward, but it's a really, really, really good resource. It's written by Matthew McKay as well as a couple other authors. I love Matthew McKay as an author. He's got another book called Messages, which is a communication skills workbook that I used for a sermon series on relationships back at my church when I was the lead pastor. And actually in there I did group exercises with the congregation. So they got like with their couple or with their spouse, with their kids, and practice some of the communication skills that he teaches. But this is not that book. The Little Act Workbook is what this one is. And I definitely recommend that if you're doing self therapy. I just got off on a tangent there. The fourth book that I recommend is called Things Might Go Terribly, Horribly Wrong by Kelly G. Wilson and Troy Dufresne. Now, this book is for those that struggle with worry, catastrophizing, perfectionism. Not all anxiety is the same. And so you may not be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. But if you are, this will be a book that you're well familiar with, that kind of thinking. Now, the authors write this from personal experience, which I really liked. I didn't think it was just anecdotal. I thought it was like, yes, this is something that's worked for you. Maybe it'll work for me. And what I like about it is they use humor with practical wisdom, and it comes across as a very relatable, as well as kind of helps you to face life's challenges with resilience. The last book I'd recommend for those doing self-therapy is called Your Life on Purpose: How to Find What Matters and Create the Life You Want. Now, for those with diagnoses of depression or PTSD, this will be a book I think will be a godsend for you or somebody in your life, because it kind of tackles and undermines one of the key tenets of depression, and that's hopelessness. It targets that and zeroes in on it in a way that it's just unlike other books. And so it helps people to capture what makes a meaningful life and how to pursue it. And in the act of pursuing that life, they begin to have a renewed sense of hope and purpose. Now, I don't want to oversell this book, but it's a really, really good book, and something that I would definitely recommend for depressive symptoms as well as PTSD. As we wrap up, I've mentioned 15 books, and that seems like a lot. So if you want to go in the description below, you'll see links for each of these books as well as their authors, so you can check them out for there. Now, these would be great books for you to suggest to somebody, hey, I'd like this under my Christmas tree, or for you to buy these for somebody that you care about. I make no money off of any of these links, so don't worry about that. These are just for your benefit. If you want to get these for free, your local library sometimes will be able to order these books for you, as well as if you're in graduate school, you can often find these on your online university library. So look for those resources that may be free of charge. Now, before you go, I want to give you another special gift for your curious mind, and that is a website called contextualscience.org. Now, this is not just a website. It's a haven for those that are in the contextual behavioral sciences. So that's ACT as well as, DBT, FAP, all those acronyms that kind of fit within this modality. Now, this is a place that has an exhaustive list of book recommendations. And so it would behoove me to tell you about this because this is where I found a lot of these books. They also have a lot of papers too, so you can look at some of the journals and some of the writings as well if you're excited about that. But that's definitely one that I'd recommend. There is a membership where you can get access to their protocols and some of the other resources that are charged. And I think if you're a student, they have a discounted price. And if you're a professional, they have another price. But it's really not that much when you consider all the resources you're giving. So whether you're a student, a professional, or simply someone on a quest of self-improvement, this website is really, really good for understanding mindfulness and purpose and all the things we talk about here on this channel. As this Christmas season unfolds, remember that your journey towards a more mindful and purposeful life begins with a single click.